let's talk about that sort of like, at what point do we see the sort of at what point did we hit that point where capitalism has provided what we need materially, but begins to diverge? Because I would even argue that there and I don't want to get ahead of myself, but that promise of equality in terms of political participation, that is also undone. Even if we don't get to a third aspiration for equality, capitalism sort of has now prevented that second part of political participation in many respects. But we'll hold off on that. But at what point did we reach like sort of critical mass, as it were, with capitalism? And why wouldn't, I'm anticipating an argument, why wouldn't getting rid of capitalism now return us to a sort of almost pre-capitalistic stage of less, producing less than we need?
So I think the way that capitalism gives us greater productive capacity is through innovation. So it's not that if we got rid of capitalism, suddenly we would lose all the technological gains that capitalism has brought us. We would still have those, and we could build on those. And also in the last kind of 50 years or so, what we've seen often is that it's not capitalism that makes those breakthroughs. It's kind of often it's state-sponsored universities that are making high-tech breakthroughs, and then capitalism comes off the back of those and monetizes them. In the same way that for a long time, brands did very well under capitalism if they made products that lasted for ages and were very robust and good quality. And now that kind of thing, we've hit the point now where that's kind of death in lots of sectors. You can't produce something that's going to last as long as a year because you'll just run out of customers really quickly. So there's this kind of inbuilt obsolescence, and there's producing kind of more and more kind of I kind of hesitate to say it, but I'm really producing more and more frivolous stuff. There's more stuff we don't need. You can go on the internet and find tons of stuff that we just don't need. And I don't want to sound like I want to kind of take everyone back to into some kind of Amish existence, and everyone has to be really austere. We really don't need to do that in order to still be able to feed everyone on the planet. We can feed everyone on the planet, and people can still have a pretty decent lifestyle. But do we really need many of the things that are available? There's something I cite in the book. In the Christmas, while I was writing the book, there was an article in the Daily Telegraph, which is a kind of an arch right-wing Tory newspaper in the UK. And it was saying, do we really need 25 Harry Potter advent calendars this year? And even when the Tories are saying, this is ridiculous, we're just producing rubbish for the sake of it, then maybe it's time to think that perhaps the market, the free market, isn't the final arbiter of exactly what should be produced and how much it should cost and who should produce it and how much they should be paid and everything else. And I think that's the problem, is we use the market. The market has to determine everything. The labour market and the commodities market determine what work gets done, who does it, how much they're paid, what the commodities sell for, who can afford them, who can't afford them, who starves to death. And actually we have reached this point where we have plenty of productive capacity now, and what we need to do is find a way of distributing that in a less insane kind of a way.
Well, I feel like the productive capacity is what capitalism creates most effectively or amplifies. Like I come back to the COVID vaccine as being an example of how state funding can actually create more rapid and important innovation as capitalism advertises itself, because that was billions of dollars from the government going into a private kind of system where they had the capacity to make these mRNA vaccines for quite a while, but you needed state intervention and funding because the market was not creating an incentive for these pharmaceutical companies to manufacture these kinds of vaccines.
Sure. Often it can only really be to have the needs of us as a society aggregated through the state. that's, that the state has the purchasing power and is often the biggest customer for a lot of innovations, because people just can't afford to buy things, or don't know they want them, or don't know they need them, or we have our whole kind of health system in the UK is just currently under threat from what we're looking at is it's going to go to much more like this kind of system you guys have in the US, but it's so kind of well loved here. People just refuse to believe that any politician will privatize it, and so it's being done without anyone really believing it's happening. It's kind of a bizarre situation.
Yeah, I want to get back to the NHS, because that is also you cite as an example of maybe how we move to the next stage of our development. But before we get there, and we should say, you're dooming all of us to never have the experience of a 16K television. But be that as it may, let's talk about. So as we move from, you also look at, in tracing the development of capitalism, you also look at the sort of development of left and right in our political system, and it was fascinating to see. I guess what it does is it establishes that left and right are concepts that are married to the context in which there are and the level of progress we have, because left was ushered in capitalism because it was the next step in a progression of where society needed to go. Can you elaborate?
Sure. Yeah. So the terms, as many people will know, the terms originate from the immediate aftermath of the French Revolution and the seating positions at the National Assembly. And the left were the revolutionaries, but that was during a capitalist revolution. So the left were pro-capitalist. That's the birth of left-wing politics, is pro-capitalism. Obviously now, depending on how far left people are, the left is either wants to get rid of capitalism altogether, or at least to mitigate its worst excesses. So to some extent, more or less, people on the left are anti-capitalism. So you can't really, if you look at it in those terms, you can't really see the left as being representative of a set of policies. What the left is representative of is a direction of travel and a progressive change, and capitalism, in terms of not only the amount of production, but in terms of the, bringing in some kind of equality of something was important under capitalism, which it hadn't been before. So in that sense, that was a progressive change. But obviously now we need a more progressive change, and so the left, always trying to move things on, is pushing those boundaries and trying to move us beyond capitalism, or at least to mitigate the excesses of capitalism. And I think I kind of make the point in the book that the liberal left, the kind of identity politics left, is they will always be calling capitalism out for its failures to meet these promises of equality for all, and everyone gets a vote, whatever color, whatever gender, etc. And the liberal left calls capitalism out on that and says, well, hang on, this isn't the case. We need to do, there's more work to do here before we've met these promises, before those promises are delivered. But the socialist left is saying, okay, we support all that, and we agree with you on all that. But even after you've done that, even after you've rearranged the pyramid so that people by race and gender and disability and whatever are perfectly arranged up and down that pyramid without discrimination, it's still a pyramid. And there's still the inequality there. And we still then need to move beyond that situation where we have this kind of unequal access to wealth and resources.